You're watching Newsfeed, the AM edition. I'm Ayanda Nyathi. It's great to start the day with you this morning. Now, as we do around this time of the day, of course, we give you a sense of the big stories ahead. Now, of course, it's a Friday. These are likely the stories to dominate throughout the weekend too, as the reaction also trickles through from Monday. And as we do that, we also give you a sense of what to expect on the channel. And to do that, of course, we're joined by our news editor, Zain Semaar, who's going to help us through the minutiae, so to speak. For Zain, happy Friday to you. Let's start with what's on Newzroom Africa's diary.
Thank you, Ayanda. So along with the usual stories of the week, like the big stories that we continue to bring you coverage on, like the State Capture Commission, which today will see the SAA technical head, Nonsasa Mamela, testifying, along with the Neil Agate case where the pathologist is expected to continue giving his testimony about the state of the body that he found after the alleged suicide. We bring you two stories that are highlighted on our diary today. The first one is by our reporter in Northwest, Zain Semaar, who will be looking at some underlying reasons of a taxi conflict in Brits. So residents have been complaining that two taxi associations have been at war over the last few days. So we'll go and we'll speak to those taxi associations as well as residents and commuters to speak about the impact of that taxi conflict on their lives. And in Mpumalanga, Mweli Masilela will speak to the residents of Barberton, who's embarking on a second day of protests. Now, these protests follow the merging of the Mbombela municipality and Umjinji municipality.
Okay.
This problem in Barberton is compounded by the fact that the dam, the Lumoto Dam, which supplies the town with water, is at an all-time low with 15%. So we'll bring you that story out of Barberton this morning.
So there's a looming water crisis in yet another area in the country.
Yes.
Which ties in quite well to the conversation we'll be having with the MMC from the Eastern Cape of Infrastructure and Engineering about some of the issues in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality too. They are literally counting down to day zero, of course, and we want to know how that situation sort of unfolded, and of course the kind of measures that are being put in place to at least assist residents in the event that happens. So you can expect that on the show as well today.
Yes.
If that's what we're going to be looking at, let me start with the business day. They are leading with a story that has kind of been sort of simmering towards the headlines, etc., etc. And of course, it's to do with Eskom and the prospects of a bailout coming from the PIC, which is a call made by Kosatu, you'll remember, as another attempt, I guess, to try find money to keep the power utility on. And the angle they're essentially going with now is the fact that there's been government, business and labor stakeholders who've actually reached a deal on the ways through which they'll mobilize these kind of funds. And the PIC's sort of proposal is amongst that kind of pact.
Yes.
And this was apparently took place between talks under the auspices of a presidential working committee, which they're saying is a three-a-side forum set up by Ramaphosa, which will liaise with business and labor leaders. This is obviously coming as we sort of count down to the State of the Nation address, where we are hoping these details, if they are true, will be fleshed out and give us a sense of the implications, right? I don't know if every worker that's going to be affected by this is down for the prospect of their pensions being used to keep Eskom afloat, particularly given the investment concerns around the SOE and whether it makes business sense to be investing in it, So if you're a single investor, would you take your pension and give it to Eskom? It looks like that decision might be co-opted, but of course only time will tell. So that's a big story on the business day this morning. You're looking at the Mail and Guardian?
At the Mail and Guardian this morning, they've got as their front page the real state of the nation, where they're talking about how municipalities, a story that we are quite familiar with in the country, lack of governance, irregularities, fraud, etc., etc. All but 18 municipalities they talk about having failed, hundreds of billions of rands. So it looks like they did a kind of feature on Kwakwa also as well, tying in with the water situation, which we keep on being told is not a crisis. But if we look at municipalities, if we look at individual stories across the country, from Mpumalanga to the Western Cape, water is a central feature. And as we've discussed in the week already on the show, Ayanda, I think the municipal tensions are going to rise as we head towards 2021 local government elections.
Absolutely, no doubt about that.
A second story, if I may,
yeah.
something that this is the following from something that's been big in the news diary, is the sick note of former President Jacob Zuma. They've got a story, the Mail and Guardian, that is about the former president's questionable medical certificate having raised sufficient concern for the SANDF to now get involved and launch their own inquiry. Because remember, the claim is that the former president has a military doctor, and is under military care. And so the story talks about the SANDF launching its own investigation into who this doctor actually is. So this story is far from over.
Absolutely. And we'll be keeping a close eye on all those developments. The Sowetan this morning, a picture of the German Chancellor, that's Angela Merkel, and of course President Cyril Ramaphosa. And this is at the back of the bilateral meetings that they had at the union buildings yesterday. Various things coming out of that, some of them predictable in my opinion, including of course assurances from the President that there are measures in place to try to revive the economy, they're going to focus on unemployment, etc., etc. Deja vu. Interestingly enough, though, Germany has gotten some things right with its power supply, you know, and Angela Merkel is by and large behind those kind of moves. So we'll be in conversation with Dr. Stembile Mbete on the show today, where we try, you know, sort of flesh out some of the details. There's always been a criticism about trying to superimpose solutions from much more developed countries on developing countries, because the context is always different, and that's across the board, including contentious issues like unemployment. But what are some of the tidbits that we can take? So we'll be asking the lecturer when she comes onto the show today. But a big story that they are also focusing on the Sowetan this morning has to do with a situation where apparently classrooms at a particular school are being used as homes. Now, it's been alleged that there are a few families in Mamelodi that are living at a public school there. And the explanation for this is that they're meant to be safeguarding the school and guarding against crime. It's quite a convoluted kind of story. Now, the EFF has also weighed in, and they are pushing back against these claims because apparently the school governing body had agreed that this will only happen if these families live there for free. But it's also being alleged that the principal is actually demanding rent from these families. So it's yeah, like I said, it's quite a convoluted story, and I don't think there's enough clarity around who these families are, why they're staying at that school, and how this is affecting the day-to-day operations of the school itself. In an environment where we're struggling with placements, I'd imagine stuff like extra classrooms can always come in handy. And so if there are 3 of them being used to house these families for security purposes, nogal, I'm really struggling to understand what the real background is and what is actually happening here. Needless to say, the Gauteng Education Department is on it, according to the Sowetan, and they'll be meeting with school officials to try ascertain some of those details themselves. But yeah, I mean, it also speaks to various other issues. I mean, if you have families in the country that still need to occupy classrooms because they don't have homes, highlights the housing crisis that we're facing. So yeah, one of those big stories that Sowetan is focusing on, and I imagine it might develop legs as the days progress. Also on the Sowetan this morning, I think it was a headline from one of the international companies speaking about how a murder has gripped a tiny kingdom in Africa. Speaking, of course, to what's happening in Lesotho at the moment. And it really does read like a Hollywood script. I mean, the First Lady allegedly masterminding the killing of her husband, which is the Prime Minister's second wife, who was involved in a divorce process, with the crime allegedly taking place just days before he was inaugurated. I mean, Steven Spielberg, wherever he is, must be thinking, this is, you know. But on a much more serious note, the alleged crime obviously killed Dipulele, who's the second wife of Prime Minister Tom Tabane, but there was somebody else involved who was injured during that shooting. She's now speaking out, and she's fearing for her life. And that's what they're reflecting on today, about how the survivor of that incident cannot understand how someone who's clearly a flight risk, which is the First Lady, because she's left the country before, was granted bail when she appeared for her murder charges. And of course, this has now unearthed issues around whether the judiciary is being influenced by some of the political heavyweights in Lesotho who made it, very possible for Maya Zaya, who's being the accused here, to be able to get bail in as quick a way as she did. So the case has been postponed until the 18th of February, and that's when we expect her to come back behind the dock and explain exactly how she might be involved in this alleged crime. I
think that the story in itself, as horrific as it may sound, also indicates to the underlying problems in the Mountain Kingdom. I think if you have that kind of situation where a former wife of the Prime Minister is accused of murder, it tells you of the power relations and the power dynamics in the elite in that country, which is a story that I'm a lot more interested in.
And the extent to which they're able to go, right? Like, what kind of strings are you able to pull to be able to do something like this and think you'll get away with it? So anyway, we're watching that story closely. You've got the Citizen.
On the Citizen this morning, following on PRASA's death trap trains. Now, this utility has been in perpetual trouble. The latest being the rail safety regulator ordering an entity to submit a corrective plan. So from brakes not working, from trains being burned, from the security around trains, from corruption at PRASA, the issue at PRASA basically intensifying. The Star this morning has got its editorial basically on the situation around the former President Jacob Zuma. It's also got a big cartoon with the President in the picture that he tweeted, looking through the scope of his pellet gun, with NEC members, Zwandile Masina and Badabile Dlamini, holding a little, what looks like a bit of a drip towards the President. And the editorial basically unpacking some of the key issues around the sick note, the right to privacy of the former President, the fact that the doctor's name has been mentioned in public, but at the same time all the key questions that the sick note and all the supposed alterations, and the fact that Judge Daya Pillay dismissed it as not a legitimate document. Those are the opinions and editorials of the Star this morning.
And you speak about opinions. I'm reminded of a comment from Carl Niehaus saying that he's willing to go to jail with the former president. And I think to myself, well, time will tell, because it was an interesting comment to make, because it's preemptive, suggesting that, the former president is likely to go to jail, and in that kind of instance.
Funny enough, funny that you mentioned that. I saw a tweet this morning by former government spokesperson Themba Maseko, basically replying to Mzwandile, to Masina, saying, who's also indicated that he's willing to go to prison. But he's basically asking Masina, do you know something that we don't? Because at the moment, the former president, not going to prison.
Exactly.
He's been asked to appear, and there's a warrant of arrest for him should he not appear in court in May.
Definitely watching all these stories for you right here on Newzroom Africa, so make sure, of course, that you keep it locked as we ventilate through some of them in the coming days. Thank you very much. Zain Semaar is our news editor here on Newzroom Africa. So, new laws approved by the President will see specialized courts equipped with the resources to better service victims of gender-based violence. After this quick break, we'll speak to Sonke Gender Justices Kay and Leon about what to expect. We'll be right back.